Sorry to ruin the suspense, but there's little doubt that Panasonic's full-frame S1H is the best mirrorless camera on the market for video. With a dual ISO sensor, 60 frames per second 4K, and even 5K video, along with 5-axis image stabilization and a brilliant viewfinder, it simply outspecs everything else. On top of that, the S1H cemented its video bona fides as the first ever mirrorless camera approved for Netflix productions. Still, I'm very curious, and I'm sure you are too, to see what the S1H is really capable of. At $4,000, it will be a pretty tempting option for low-budget film and TV producers, especially given the artistic possibilities of a full-frame sensor. With the flip-around screen, it looks like vloggers with some money and muscle will consider this big camera too. All that said, the S1H isn't perfect, and there are a lot of good options in its price range. Now, let's take it out into Paris to see what it's capable of. The most noticeable thing about this camera is the brutish size. At 2.5 pounds, it dwarfs all other mirrorless cameras in bulk and weight. It's even large for a DSLR, outweighing Canon's 5D Mark IV. That size would be too much for casual photographers, but it isn't a deal breaker for pro video shooters. On the contrary, the extra size made it more stable for handheld shooting. Plus, the large grip is easy to hold onto for run and gun cinematography. With all that space, Panasonic was able to put in tons of physical controls. It has an LCD info screen, joystick, front and back control dials, and separate physical controls for autofocus and shooting modes. On the rare occasions I had to dive into the menus, Panasonic's system is better than most, though I still got lost occasionally. Overall, the S1 models have the best ergonomics of any mirrorless cameras right now. So needless to say, this camera is decked out for filmmakers. It not only has a very high resolution, very high refresh electronic viewfinder, and I never thought I'd say this, but the rear display is actually overkill. It not only flips around, but it actually tilts up and down as well, making it possible to do low angle and other types of shooting. Problem with that is that it sticks out a little bit from the back of the camera, and it adds a little bit of extra weight compared to the S1. All told though, this is an excellent vlogging camera, as it has a flip around screen, it has microphone input, it has an in-body stabilizer, and really everything you need. The only problem with it is that it's just a little bit on the heavy side. On top of a Type-C USB port for charging and data transfers, the SD has a full-sized HDMI port. That's also ideal for filming with an external recorder, as it's less likely to fall out than a smaller HDMI cable. You also get a pair of SD UHS-2 card slots that can easily handle the camera's high 400 megabit per second video data rate. The S1H does have a large battery, but because of the big sensor, it only delivers 400 shots on a charge. You can shoot video for about 2 hours though, which is impressive considering the video quality and data rates. Unlike the S1 and S1R, the S1H is designed for video rather than photography. However, it can handle stills just as well. And because of the dual ISO system, it's actually better in low light than the S1 for both stills and video. The S1H can shoot in bursts at 9 frames per second or 6 frames per second with continuous autofocus. That's well behind what Sony's a7 III and a7R4 can do, but for a video-centric camera, it's not bad. Like all Panasonic mirrorless cameras, the S1H has a contrast detect autofocus system called depth from defocus. With 225 points, it's not quite as fast or accurate as phase detect systems. However, it's considerably better than it was when it first came to the S1 thanks to recent firmware updates. Even in slightly dim light, it reliably locks onto static or moving subjects with continuous autofocus. The face and eye detection AI follows human and animal subjects well, though the focus itself is sometimes slow to catch up. Overall, AF is solid, but still behind Canon and Sony systems in terms of speed and reliability. One of the reasons this camera is so big is because of the 5-axis in-body stabilization. If you use it with a stabilized lens, you'll get up to 6 stops of shake reduction, letting you shoot sharp shots even in low light. It's not quite as effective for video though, as we'll see shortly. And speaking about video, that's where this camera really crushes other mirrorless pretenders. You can shoot 4K at 30 frames per second using the entire sensor width with oversampling and no line skipping. It'll even handle 5.9K at 24 frames per second and anamorphic 6K video at 24p. All of this video is available with 10-bit color for maximum editing flexibility. If you want the Netflix stamp of approval though, you'll need to shoot in vlog mode using the all-I 400 megabit per second data rate. That's only available for 4K and DCI 4K video at up to 30p and not 5.9K, 6K or 60 frame per second 4K. The video quality, as you can imagine, is nearly flawless. At the highest quality settings, it's extremely sharp and skin tones and colors look natural. Vlog mode delivers 14 stops of dynamic range, and with 10-bit color, I had plenty of creative choices in post. You can also use those settings to create HDR videos. The dual ISO system gives it incredible low light capability. As good as I found the dual ISO on the GH5S, the full-frame S1H has bigger pixels that can absorb more light. Amazingly, video and photos are usable with acceptable noise levels at up to ISO 25600 and even beyond. What's most interesting for cinematographers is the large sensor. I was able to use it to create intense bokeh, especially with a fast lens. In fact, this camera has shallower depth of field than most other models approved by Netflix. I could see producers choosing the S1H for its artistic possibilities, not just because it's cheap and relatively small. As with photos, the video autofocus is good but not great. However, for regular shooting, vlogging, stand-ups, and other chores, it does the job well. It's true that professional crude productions will generally use cinema lenses and pull focus manually. However, run-and-gun crews often use Canon's latest C200 and C300 Mark II models because the autofocus is so reliable. The S1H doesn't measure up to those models in that way, but it's not bad and it's a lot cheaper. One drawback is that if you try to move the camera too much when filming, the IBS makes the image bounce when it hits the limits. It's not meant to be a substitute for a gimbal though, and it works great for regular handheld shooting. With the Netflix blessing and high price tag, I expected Panasonic's S1H to outclass every other mirrorless camera for video quality. After spending 2 weeks with it, I can confirm it does that. However, professional Netflix production work with a full crew is one thing. Run-and-gun production, vlogging, and casual shooting on your own is quite another. In that capacity, the S1H also beats every other camera except possibly for one. Canon's 1DX has similar video specs and slightly better autofocus. However, it lacks 10-bit recording and other features crucial for many videographers. Panasonic's GH5 has become indispensable for many vloggers and filmmakers, and I think the S1H will achieve that status too. Sure, it's double the price, but it has double the capability and lets you create images with incredible quality and bokeh that no other camera can touch. If filmmaking is your thing, and if you have $4,000, I wouldn't hesitate.